Welcome to the Diversity Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Kratz. I am thrilled you are here with us today. Our purpose is to share stories, ideas, and tools to help you on your diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. Let's meet this week's guest. Welcome back to the show. So excited to have with us Celeste Warren. She is Vice President, Global Diversity and Inclusion Center of Excellence at Merck. And she has over 30 years of experience in HR, DEI, and change management. As we know, a lot of those lanes come together with DEI work. She also serves on the board of RWJ Barnabas, Health Systems Paradigm for Parity, and All In Together. And she's a member of CNBC's Workforce Executive Council and World's 50s Inclusion and Diversity Impact Community. And she's here with us to talk about her book, How to Be a Diversity and Inclusion Ambassador, Everyone's Role in Helping All Feel Accepted, Engaged, and Valued. And she's also written for a variety of publications, as well as been honored for awards by Black Enterprise, Savoy Magazine, Women's E-News, and some DEI publications as well. So excited to have you with us, Celeste.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Julie. This is quite an honor to be a part of your podcast, so thank you.
Wow, I'm so excited to hear. We love to hear from folks doing the work inside organizations. Sometimes, folks like myself, as consultants and practitioners, we get to bebop in and then out, and it's always fun to hear what is happening day to day. So excited for that glimpse with you today. But before we dig into all that, Celeste, tell us about your background. How did you get into diversity work?
Well, I like to say that I was born into it. My father was the first Black teacher and principal in Western Pennsylvania, where we grew up, small steel mill town, out about an hour from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And with him being the first, I had a front row seat for all of the things that were happening, and our dinner table each night was filled with conversation about what were some of the challenges that he had that day, what did he do about it, how did he proceed, just basic, conversation where around the dinner table where dad comes home or mom comes home and you talk about your day. His day was very unique in that he was challenged with how do I maneuver in the school system, in this school district, as the first Black teacher and then first Black principal. So I'd like to say that I was born into it from that perspective, and it's always been sort of innate and a part of me wherever I went, whatever I did, whatever role I was in.
Yeah, that's the first, a lot of times the pioneers, the firsts, don't always see the results of their actions, but your story, your living proof of the DEI work continues beyond your father. And I'm sure those dinner table conversations help plant those seeds. Beautiful. So Celeste, fast forward to today. What's keeping you busy in the DEI world? What is it? What does a day in the life look like for you?
Each day is different. It's so interesting. Sometimes it feels like whiplash because you go from a conversation or a meeting where you've been able to influence that leadership team and really engage in some really strong dialogue, great dialogue around diversity inclusion, helping them, the light bulbs to go off, helping them to see where they can apply interventions to get at creating a more inclusive and more diverse workforce. And then you go into another meeting later on and it's the exact opposite, where you're having to really just sort of work the issue and meet them where they are. So, I think, my day is filled with how do we integrate implement the DE&I strategy for our organization across the 100 and so plus countries where we're at in different markets, and working through the leaders and not the line leaders, the business leaders, as well as the HR leaders as well. And it's we focus in four areas: our people, our culture, our business, and our world. So we want to make sure that we're creating a diverse work environment that mirrors our employee base should mirror the diversity that we see in our patient and our customer base. And from a culture, we want to make sure that we are creating that environment around that population of employees where they can feel empowered, a sense of belonging, psychological safety, so they can do the work that we have asked them to do within the organization. And then the third piece around integrating DE&I into our business strategies, making sure that from our drug discovery, development, manufacturing, marketing, and sales processes, and all of those enabling functions as well, that we're integrating DE&I into all of those areas. And then the last piece is the external piece. How are we making sure that not just that we're doing the things that we need to be doing within the four walls of our company, but picking our heads up and looking outside and saying, what is it as an organization that we have an obligation and a responsibility to do externally in the world to make the world a better place to live in today and for the future? So that's kind of, and literally each day I'm doing something in at least two or three of those four areas. It's not like, okay, Monday I'm going to focus on people and Tuesday I'm going to focus on culture. And it doesn't work that way. You have to basically kind of, I call it knead the dough in all of the areas across every day. And it's never boring. I'll tell you that much. Never, ever boring.
Well, like you said, the conversations change from meeting to meeting, let alone day to day. And sometimes it feels like a whiplash type of effect of like, wait, I thought
Mhm.
everyone got it. And then you're like, oh, no, we're still sometimes we still have to go back to the basics or, deal with challenges day to
Oh,
day.
absolutely, Julie. And you're riding this high off of one meeting where you've had a great engagement, and then you go to a next one, and you're just sort of like, okay, let me start all over again.
Yeah, and it's that old adage we love to use in the DA space of meet people where they're at
Yes.
because
Hmm.
people have had different lived experiences. Not everyone knows what we know, or some folks, unfortunately, this is still so new, and can feel like so much. And then, of course, you have the other side that's like, not enough, not enough. Like we
Hmm.
need to go faster. So it's like a speed up, slow down, depending on the tempo of the conversation.
Yeah,
Um,
I've had to learn. I call it globalization.
hmm,
That you have a global strategy that is enterprise wide, but it is a framework by which anyone, any market, any country, any part of the business can leverage to say, what do we need to be doing locally that's relevant for the employees in our respective area of the business or area of the world. And that's why I say globalization. It's a global strategy, but it's also relevant. It can be applied and relevant across the different areas of the world.
Well, I see that a lot with my clients that are US based as DEI has kind of as a program, a lot of times origin in the United States. As we take that to other parts of the world, it's like, well, this doesn't make as much
Hmm.
sense here. Our experience is different. So that globalization you're talking about is important. Of course, with DEI, you have to make it relevant to where people are at physically, socially, economically, etc. Celeste, I'm curious, you've been at this work for a while now. If you could make two columns, where have been the wins? Like, what have been the things that have gone really well that have made an impact? And then where are the things that you think in the DEI space we're still like just not quite there yet? Maybe not a win, maybe more of a work in progress.
So I think, just across the industry, and when I say industry, I mean DE&I. And Julie, you've probably seen this too in your travels, but different companies are in different places. But I think one of the things that companies are doing better is the awareness and the understanding of this is important. It's not something that's just going to go away. It's going to be amplified now and in the future. And you have to either get on board or you're going to not just lose talent in the war for talent, but you'll also lose business. And there's study after study, research after research that shows the importance of integrating DE&I in your business and your organization to create that competitive advantage for your organization. So I think they're starting to understand that, and certainly there's been an amplification following the murder of George Floyd in 2020. So here we are in 2023. And you still see the emphasis there across the enterprise. Some companies better than others, but for the most part, I think that momentum has continued. And so I would say that those are the wins. People understand that they should have a diverse workforce. They understand they should have equitable practices. They understand the difference between equality and equity for the most part, and know that they have to do certain things to really make sure that everybody's on the same playing field. They're aware of their unconscious biases. That aspect of individual reflection. And I think that, a lot of organizations have hired on since 2020 chief diversity and inclusion officers. And that's been sort of, depending on the organization, if they're really serious about it, they've not just hired the right person with the right skills and capabilities, but they put the resources behind the person so they can be successful in the role as well. So I think that's important. One of the things I think that we still struggle is, making sure that at the top of the organization that it's just as diverse as the whole organization. So that's something that I think most companies are still struggling with and still working at, but you have to prioritize it. You have to really stay after it, and continue to keep reminding all of those folks in the ecosystem that this is a priority for the organization. And then also too, we know there's going to be headwinds coming, right? We look at what's happening in the universities with Harvard and the SCOTUS decision coming in June, and a lot of these things that are happening in different parts of the country in the United States, in Florida and anti-woke legislation and all these different things. We know there's headwinds that are going to be coming, and we just have to keep pushing and keep going, because this is the work that the world needs. And we need to continue to keep doing it regardless of the political rhetoric that's happening. So I think from the standpoint of the work that still needs to be done, as we make strides and we go 5 steps forward, and then, we'll 2 steps back, and then 3 steps forward and 1 step back. So it's not a linear progression. And I think that we have to understand that. And just keep pressing and keep moving forward. One of the things I think that is really going to need a focus moving forward, and is the fact that we have to, in meeting people where they are, as you said, there's that what I like to say, we've all seen that illustration of where there's 3 people are standing on one rock and they're looking over the fence. And then the next illustration, the person on the right has 3 rocks, because now it allows them to see over the fence, and the person in the middle has 2. What's happening with those acts of equity, and that's what I call the rocks, acts of equity, women's leadership programs and various different things that we put in place, diverse sourcing strategies, all of these different things that we put in place. The person that was standing on one rock in the first illustration and one rock in the second illustration, or they're looking to their right now and saying, well, why does that person have 3 rocks and that person have 2 rocks and I just have 1? And they're not understanding that there's a fence there. And that, in my analogy, the fence are all of the isms that exist: racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, etc. And they have always been able to see over that fence. They don't know how that manifests itself to the person all the way to the right and the person in the middle. So we have to have those conversations, and those acts of equity, for that reason, they're causing some disruption in the organization. And this is where DE&I leaders and practitioners, business leaders, HR leaders, we have to have the courage of our convictions to have those conversations with the person who's standing on one rock, to help them to understand what it feels like and how that manifests itself standing on that one rock in that first illustration and still not being able to see over the fence. So that's kind of the where we are, because none of us are at that third illustration where the rocks are gone, the fence is done. We have to do everything. We have to put the acts of equity in place while we're simultaneously tearing down all of the isms, tearing down that fence. And that's the work that we're doing now, and that has to be done, and it has to be done with all of the disruptions and all of the people who are the naysayers, all of the people who don't understand, have lived the life of privilege and don't understand why the rocks are needed. We have to do that body of work, and it's a necessary action that we have to do. Otherwise, we will not be creating that true culture of inclusion and belonging that we truly want to see in the workforce.
I know it's that analogy is so powerful, right? And listeners, if you haven't seen this, equity versus equality, put it in a Google browser, or any browser, and you'll likely stumble upon an image, just like Celeste explained, where this fence is systemically keeping everybody back. But instead of focusing on the fence, like you said, we tend to focus on, well, they got more than I do. But it doesn't matter if you still can't see past the fence. We're all affected by these systems that keep other people, even if it's not us, back. So I love that illustration, and it very much has these headwinds. I think, with the steps we've taken forward with DEI, I think a lot of people predicted that. In 2020, that was a surge. It continued into 2021. We saw a little bit of a trickle off in 2022. So, here a quarter or so into 2023, it's always like, what's next? And I think that really speaks to your book about how to create more ambassadors, how everyday acts of inclusion make a difference. And I would argue, especially for folks with power and privilege, that when they partake in these activities, their voice is heard differently. And that doesn't make it right. But if we could get everyone, especially with people that don't seem to be benefiting as much, maybe not getting all the rocks, the equity rocks, but how they could use their voice and how they could use their actions to serve others. Tell us more, Celeste, about your book and some ways that folks can be more inclusive.
Well, the book is basically providing a simple model to help people to be empowered to impact change within their respective organization, their institution, their whatever it is, wherever they're working, school system. Help them to gives them just practical steps for impacting change. And I started this book because no matter where I was, speaking internally, externally, inevitably there would be that one person that would walk up to me after I finished speaking and would say, Celeste, I love what you had to say, but I'm not a leader. I'm not a diversity inclusion leader. I'm not a business leader. I'm not even a people manager. I don't know what I can do to impact change. And after hearing that for years, I said, people need to understand that within, let's take an organization, any organization, you have a certain percentage of the organization that is comprised of managers and leaders. And usually that's about 20, 25, 30%. The majority of your organization are what we call individual contributors, people who aren't people managers. And if everybody doesn't understand the role that they play in creating the environment that they want to see, that culture of engagement, empowerment, feeling valued and accepted, then it's not going to work. Because yes, leaders and managers play a very important role, but they're not the majority of the people in the organization. And so I wrote the book so everyone could understand that everybody has to play a role in order for us to really create that environment that all of us want to see within our workplace. And so it's just a simple model of one, you need to do a personal assessment. You need to look at yourself and do an assessment and understand your strengths, your areas of opportunity. What are your developmental areas? What are your unconscious biases as well? So you're in touch with yourself. And then once you do that assessment, then look around you, look at the organization, look at your department, look at the area that you work and say, okay, well, what are some of the obstacles that are getting in the way from it being a more inclusive environment? And take knowledge, take an inventory of that. And then the last thing, you can do the analysis, the self-reflection, you can do the inventory of your work environment, but if you don't take action, then it's just ideas in your head. So the last thing is just simply to take action, and that's it. You know, one, two, three, pretty much it. And the book gives examples for different personas. So, you know, looking through the eyes of the individual contributor, looking through the eyes of someone who's in the DE&I space, someone who's in the HR space, a C-suite leader, because believe it or not, they still sometimes feel like there's stuff that they can't be doing, and that something's hindering them, whether that be, oh, you know, the CEO or the board, or, you know, it just, that lack of empowerment isn't just in the individual contributor. So it's different personas that I focus in on in some of the chapters as well. So that's basically kind of what the book is about, and I just hope that people, when they read it, they have some takeaways that they can do right the next day, you know, when they go back into work, and to really impact change.
Yeah, I think one of the themes, one drumbeat we've been hearing a lot is, yeah, senior leaders need to be engaged in this work. But you raised a really interesting point, Celeste, about the majority of the workforce are the frontline workers or the individual contributors that, may not seem like they have as much access to power, but by sheer mass, if they're modeling the behavior that's expected, that emotion, that contagious element of human behavior can really take hold in an organization. I wonder for individual contributors or those that want to be a part of change in an organization but might feel powerless. I think you mentioned self-awareness, assessing yourself, so critical. Understanding your biases, the messages you've been told about, diversity and inclusion that may have been helpful and harmful, and then how to take action. I wonder if you could share some tidbits for those who want to take action but may not see themselves as a position of power. What are some simple ways that they can take action and be a better ally or ambassador?
Well, I think, you know, one thing is in the area of your self-reflection. You can go online and Google, you know, D&I assessments or things like that, and you can probably 1,000 things this day and age will come up. And you know, just take an assessment, take a little assessment, you know, from that perspective. There's unconscious bias education all over the place. You can definitely read articles and understand about everybody has biases, and how you shouldn't let those make an impact on decisions around people. So that self-reflection piece is you can read different articles or things like that, but you can also go ask a neighbor. So someone who is a colleague who you trust, that they'll give you really candid insight on you as an individual. Sit down and say, hey, let's go to lunch, or let's go have some coffee, and I'd really like to talk to you about, you know, how I'm showing up as a diversity ambassador. How am I showing up either at meetings that you're in with me, or you know, or if it's somebody that's close to you that knows you very well, you can ask them, you know, how am I showing up in a lot of different places. But that's an easy another way. Sometimes not so easy, if you because you want someone who's going to give you the unfiltered feedback. And so being able to have that is really, really important. But that's the first step. And then the second thing, when you're taking, you know, looking around you, look at your company's website. So go on your company's website, whatever it might be. Look at the photos and the images that they have. Do they reflect diversity within your workforce? Um, that's one thing that you can do. That's an easy thing. Just, you know, click on the keys and go and see. Look at some of your leadership team. So, you know, walk down the hallway in your organization, or or look at some of the leaders that are in place, and is it are they diverse? What's the percentage of it? And you can usually get some of this information, your board and your executive committees, the CEOs, direct reports, again online. Go pull out. Go online and look at your employee policies, the HR policies, and look at a few of those and look at it through a lens of, is this really inclusive of all employees? Is it really reflective of meeting the needs of all of our employees? Do you have leave, maternity leave and paternity leave? And do you have flexible work arrangements in your organization? Look around and see if you have lactation rooms, prayer rooms, and reflection rooms in your organization. Those are all some of the things that you can do in taking an inventory. And then once you've done some of those things, some of the things of action you can do is, for some of your colleagues, send out a brief article on diversity, equity, inclusion, and tell everybody, hey, let's meet in such and such conference room for lunch. Bring your lunch to the conference room and let's talk about this article. And invite 10 or 15 of your colleagues, or 5 or 10 of your colleagues and that you work with, and have a conversation and start. What you're doing is you're building the D&I capabilities of those around you by doing something like that. Ask your immediate manager if you have regular staff meetings. Say, can I take a half hour on the staff meeting and send an article out to the team, and then let's have a discussion around it? Or you can, if your organization has it, we have e-learnings, different D&I e-learnings that are scalable, that you can have, that are across different languages, that you can just pull down from our resource center and use in different staff meetings, and really, really easy. Ask if your manager if you can facilitate one of those, and or facilitate a discussion around diversity and inclusion. Join an employee resource group or affinity group, and if your organization doesn't have one, then start one. That's one of the things that you can do. So, there are lots of things that you can do from the standpoint of actions that you can take no matter where you are in the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. So much of it is education and sharing that
Mm-hmm.
education, right? And those resources. It may not feel like things change in that room, but the behavior when people walk out of that room, leave that setting with their minds updated, not updated, but like just shifted. You don't know the impact that behavior is, like little dominoes falling, setting that
That's
stage.
exactly how it is, Julie. That's exactly how it is. And I've seen time and time again where you've had a conversation with someone, and then it's like a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
They go and they have a conversation with
Mm-hmm.
1 or 2 people, and then they go and they have a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and it does start to create this effect and this impact where you all of a sudden have made an impact on a larger group of people. and
Mm-hmm.
and that's just always so great to see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
People will say, "Oh, Celeste, you want to boil the ocean, and you're just talking about boiling the ocean, and you're going to overwhelm people." And I always say, "No, I'm not talking about boiling the ocean. What I'd like for people to do is just take 1 or 2 people, boil 1 or 2 people around you, or 3 people around you, and eventually through the ripple effect, that will boil the ocean. But all I want you to do is just focus on 2 or 3 people around you and try to boil them."
In a good way, yes.
Yes, yes.
That we change. Yeah, I mean, it's a good metaphor. Yeah. And don't always pick. I always caution people, do not pick the most difficult
Yeah,
person
yes.
to change, because you're going to get frustrated and burn out your energy. I have made this mistake. Family members, all sorts of stuff. And it's hard. I mean, you still want to hold them accountable, but pick some people that are kind of like capable of change that probably just don't get it yet, right? If you can find that magic mix of somebody that wants to get it, doesn't get it yet, that's really, really empowering. And it makes you want to keep at it and go after the other ripple effects to boil too.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Celeste has been awesome. It's quite the day in the life of a diversity leader that you've shown us today. Tell our listeners, how can they get a copy of your book? How can they follow your work as well?
Well, you can get the book on Amazon.com. Barnes and Noble has it as well, but on most of the online outlets, you can get the book. Excuse me. And then you can also get more information on my website, crwdiversity.com, and get more information there as well.
Perfect, perfect. We will link to those in the show notes so you can connect with Celeste. And I just encourage you, listeners, leaders like Celeste that are out there doing this work, if you can follow them on LinkedIn, subscribe to their newsletters, folks that we have on this podcast. I think that slow drip in your inbox and in your news feed just helps keep this alive and well so we don't kind of go back and regress, because those headwinds you mentioned, Celeste, are real, and they feel stronger when we're not getting those positive vibes and those positive news about what's going well. And you've certainly given us an optimistic perspective of what's next in the future. So thank you for spending your time with us today, Celeste. So thankful for you.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you liked what you heard, consider hiring Julie and the Next Pivot Point team to come speak at your organization's next event. We speak on a range of topics, from active allyship to inclusive leadership to how to create a culture where everyone feels seen, heard, and feels a sense of belonging. Thank you for being on this journey with us. Go to nextpivotpoint.com to learn more.